Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the founder and publisher of AIESECSigma.com, the largest community of Lean and Six Sigma professionals in the world and the resource for learning to drive breakthrough improvement. Here's what we do here. We bring on successful Lean and Six Sigma business leaders, learn from their past experiences, and share their strategies and tactics with you. Then when you have a success to share, you can come on the show and give back as today's guest is going to do. We've all learned primarily in face-to-face classroom settings, whether it be in high school or college. We've all heard of online learning, where you don't see anyone in person. Here's today's big question. What is blended learning, and how can it benefit your business or organization? Joining me today to answer this question is John Best. John is Vice President of Lean Six Sigma at The Quality Group, a learning management system provider that focuses on blended learning and serves clients as diverse as Capital One, the Department of Defense, and Hispira. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Glad to be here.
Let's start with this question, John. What is one company that has implemented blended learning in the past year, and what results have they achieved?
Well, that's a good question. We've had several. I think one that comes to mind right off is Monsanto. Of course, being a content provider, we don't always get the numbers as far as the results go, but their enthusiasm is very high, and it's very typical. After their initial experience with blended learning, they're very excited about it and expanded it to their worldwide network. So we provided them courses in Spanish and Portuguese to do that, and we've noticed there's been just an awful lot of activity there with them. And we've also worked heavily with the Department of Defense, which is Office of the Secretary of Defense, which is rolling out really the first government-wide blended learning program. And they're pulling people in from sites all over the U.S., in fact, all over the world, into their blended courses.
Great. And so you don't necessarily have any of the statistics around their blended learning, how many more people are trained, how the effectiveness of their programs because they're internal and you provide the system for them to use?
Well, I can relate my personal experience when I was at Seagate, and when we rolled out blended learning there, we could cut our classroom time in half and our travel costs in half. And one of the things we noticed is that the people that completed the training were getting through their projects faster with a lot more success. And that's the feedback we got from the Department of Defense, is they're very excited about the fact that the projects are being completed very quickly with very good results. We're also seeing, too, that the blended learning being available, the courses being available, students can go back and review those at any time. So if they're down the road a ways and they've completed their training, now they find themselves on a project, they can go back in and take another look at value stream mapping or basic statistics or something like that, and get a refresher as part of the job.
Yeah. So in a Lean Six Sigma program, the biggest metric that anybody would be interested in measuring is, are they completing their projects faster and are they getting better results for the projects?
Sure, and the whole thing is around the results. Any good process improvement program is going to focus on, what are the key metrics in my organization? What keeps my executives up at night? Mm-hmm. If my whole thing, like in consumer electronics, is time to market, and I can tie a project into time to market, and I say I can get this project completed faster with better results, you're going to have everybody's attention. And that's really the key to success here is tying everything into not how many people you train, not how many projects you work, but what are you actually turning the dial on your corporate metrics?
Right. All right. So let's put some bounds on this conversation before we get into all the details, John. What does learning mean to you as a corporate leader?
Well, it's a lot of things. It's obviously the live in-person training. You've got that both in the classroom and you've got that virtually as well. And with some of the latest innovations we've seen, just like this Skype call we're on right now, you're seeing a tremendous increase in the number of people taking this approach. You've got online courses. But the important thing here is learning needs to extend past that to really get a return on investment. You've got to look at the projects. you've got to look at the post-training activities, the case studies, the hands-on activities, what happens after the classroom as well. So it really takes on a broader context. And also along with that, we're really seeing an increase in the social media, which gives us an ability to collaborate and get answers very quickly. I mean, who would have thought 15 years ago when we started all this Lean Sigma stuff that we'd have people, wanting to learn Six Sigma, watching their telephone while out on the treadmill. It's that type of thing. And we have collaboration websites. We have wikis in a lot of organizations that allow people to share. And the whole thing here is we're getting organizational knowledge. We're able to expand that knowledge and then make it available to everybody else.
Makes sense. So we talked about in-person training. I think everybody understands what that means. You go to a physical location, you sit there for a day or 5 days or what have you. When I went through my black belt training, I had 4 weeks of a week in duration each, separated by, I think, 2 to 3 weeks in between those 4 or 5 weeks. I think we might have had some facilitation training as well as the DMAIC training. And so we understand online training where I can go and watch some videos and it'll walk me through and maybe there's some quizzes. But what does it mean to do blended learning, John?
Blended learning is a combination of all those things. And the idea of the blend is to get everybody together, first of all. It's not all online. It's not all in classroom. But when you get people into class, there's a lot of wastes that take place. In fact, I'll share with you here in a little bit the 8 wastes of blended of classroom learning. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to prepare people coming into class so that first of all you level set everybody, and so everybody comes in exposed at least to the same amount of material. And people a little bit behind in statistics can get themselves caught up. If they say, well, I'm fairly advanced in this stuff anyway, which is kind of rare, but you get one once in a while, they can kind of work through that stuff a little bit faster. So once you get into the classroom, then you don't have to spend a lot of time going over the basics. People have the basics already, but you spend your time saying, okay, now here's what you learned and here's how you actually apply it on the job. Here's what it means to you. And so blended learning is using all of these different social media outlets. It can be pre-reading, it can be research on websites, it can be wiki sites, lots of things. There's lots of possibilities.
Okay, and we'll get into the details, but does the quality group recommend a specific formula for blended learning for somebody that's going to go through, say, Greenbelt training, where you do some online to level set, then you do some in person, then you go back and do more online? Is there some sort of formula?
It absolutely depends on the needs of the client, and we help people develop learning models to fit their business needs. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that have to go into coming up with business to come up with learning models. You have to consider, do you have people that are remote? Do you have people that are all in class? What's your level of people? Are you going to be mixing accountants and engineers in one class? And then once you get this, you can come up with a plan that is pretty much, you break your class down into doable chunks, and then you say, okay, here's your prerequisites for your first class session. So take these classes, you'll have a little post-test, you'll have some activities, then come to class, and we will assume once you get into class you've had the online learning because the class is going to move pretty fast. And they appreciate that. So we get through a 1 week session in 2 days, let's say. Then we give them another assignment, say, okay, here's your next batch of e-learning, then come back again. Usually we'll repeat that twice with green belts, and we'll go 4 sessions with the black belts. But I've seen all kinds of variations on that as well. People want to do it in half days, or they want to stretch it out over a longer period or condense it. So there's just a tremendous variety of learning models that are available.
Yeah. Okay. And you help people figure out what the right learning model for each organization is as well.
Absolutely.
All
sure.
right. Great. The funny thing, when I went through my training, the one level setting prerequisite of going to class was to read the book Statistics Without Tears. It was a short little thin book, but it because we had engineers and we had, administrators and we had project leaders that weren't necessarily engineers all coming together to the class. They just wanted to make sure that you weren't going to cry when we started to talk about statistics.
I think I've got that on my bookshelf right back.
John, before you joined the quality group, you were at Seagate. What was your role there?
Well, I was at Seagate as a quality engineer. My background is industrial engineering. And so Six Sigma was a logical fit. And when they started the Six Sigma program, I was actually their first master black belt. And they kind of expanded, had several of us. When I went through my black belt training, it was mostly potential master black belts, and some of us wound up teaching our own black belt class to kind of show you how that went. That was a little the pressure the management put on us. And the last several years, I was their kind of the director of, or general manager, program manager, you might say, of their worldwide training. So my responsibility was to roll out the training, to kind of manage the training base among the various sites around the world.
Yeah, and that's no small feat because Seagate is distributed around the world.
Absolutely, and I've conducted classes from Singapore to Ireland, and I've had people in blended classes at both locations, and that makes time zones a real challenge, but it's usually me up at 2 in the morning doing the class. But that was a real experience. I learned an awful lot working with Seagate, and through Oklahoma State University, I'm on the engineering faculty. I've had a chance to work with companies as kind of an independent consultant as well over the years.
Great. Well, it's good to see that somebody who was doing this in the corporate environment is now helping others do the same thing and get phenomenal results. And, I think that I became familiar with some of your work, John, a year or so ago. For a number of years, AIESEC Sigma produced the Department of Defense annual performance symposiums. They were, 600, 700
Sure.
people that converged on Washington, D.C. and shared best practices and, became inspired by some of the speakers. I believe it was at one of the most recent ones. There was a project competition where teams of 2 or 3 pulled together, and they solved a simulated project as quickly and correctly as possible. Not all of them got the exact correct answer, but, it's an evaluation. And I heard that you wrote that simulation. Is that correct?
Actually, it was a team effort. It was based on a simulation I'd used in the past, but I had an awful lot of help with it. And we call that our capstone project. And we put together a one-day competition based on a scenario in the Department of Motor Vehicles, which we thought everybody could kind of relate to. And we actually visited some DMVs that were having trouble, and we benchmarked some that were really very successful in applying lean principles. And we partnered with Pro Model Corporation and developed a simulation of an actual DMV that we worked into the problem. And essentially, we gave the teams a problem at the beginning of the day, and then they had the full day to solve it. And of course, we had to have report outs like every 2 hours, and we'd stop and play some games and do some fun things in there too. And at the end of the day, we had a very clear winner in the group. So.
Yeah, and I love that. I was there. I enjoyed the fact that I wasn't competing with any of the people there because there were some smart people in the room.
Really?
But it was well executed and a great simulation. All right, so let's chat about classroom learning. You mentioned earlier that there are wastes associated with only classroom learning. So if you only did it the way that I learned, you had to come to the classroom. What are those wastes?
Well, there's several of them here, and we've written a paper on it that's called "Live Only Learning for Lean Six Sigma is Worse Than You Think." And just to share with you a couple of ideas in here. I mean, take transportation waste. That's a clear one. People have to travel to come to class. But then you've got waiting waste. Not only are you waiting for the class to start, because we're so busy these days, we don't have time for a class, so we're going to go out and we're going to Google something, and we may not get the right answer, or we may, But you also have people away from their actual job. You have overproduction, where you're putting out vast amount of information to people. So the drinking out of the fire hose, like you probably experienced in your black belt class. And there's another aspect to it too in overproduction, and that's just producing volumes of printed materials that are used in class. Motion waste could be inefficient use of classroom time, for example, where you spend time teaching the basics. Your class is only going to go as fast as your slowest person, assuming they're willing to ask questions. Otherwise, they're completely lost. Inventory waste. True transfer of knowledge isn't done until the end of the class. And due to this information overload, the inefficiency in the class time and poor learning accountability, learners leave unprepared, and green belts will come out of class, and then they're in a project, and they say, okay, now what do I do? You've got extra processing waste because you've got you may have to have two master black belts teaching a large class, and you pull them out of key things. You'll have the human potential waste. Your learner skills atrophy over time. And a huge barrier to successful projects is people that don't have the knowledge and the ability to do what they're supposed to do. And so the weakened skills will really hurt their project potential. And then, of course, you have the defects. In several aspects of that, the class material may not be applicable to their actual work, because in a classroom environment, to justify the big class, you pretty much do a one-size-fits-all. And engineers and accountants in the same class, I use that example. That's a tough audience. Mm-hmm. And you've got to make sure that you've transferred the relevant skills for each group. And you don't have time to work with them individually in a total classroom setting.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the couple that stuck out to me as somebody who has, you know, been a lifelong learner is the class goes only as fast as the slowest learner. And the slowest learner changes from topic to topic. So, you know, if you talk about the first topic with me and I'm the slowest learner at that session, I need you to explain it to me again. It's going to be somebody else the next time that just, you know, they were looking at their phone when you said that critical piece of information, or they weren't, you know, focused on it, or they just couldn't comprehend the way it was explained that one time. And so suddenly the timeline is exponentially larger. You know, and the other big thing that is the MBBs being available and only having a certain amount of material. Whereas with an online class, if you knew that MBB number 1 was phenomenal at statistics, could explain it to everybody, and MBB 2 was great at actually translating information into actionable day-to-day type environment, you could have them each focus on their own core competencies and pull it all together into a cohesive, you know, educational game plan.
Exactly right. In fact, we did a lot of that at Seagate. We had specialties in our master black belts, but in a classroom environment, you'll pull them in to teach specific things. In the blended environment, you can actually make them part of the blended program. You can, you know, record them, or you know, lots of opportunities to pull in the expertise of the different people.
Yeah. So you talked about, you know, a lot of different ways of classroom learning, and I said, you know, I feel the same way. I'm sure a lot of people watching this interview have felt all of those same ways. Why not just go to online learning? Why is online learning only not as effective as possible?
Well, that's a good question, and learning comes by doing. And you really have to have an immediate application of the tools and the techniques, or the learning starts to fade. And I've seen green belts who weren't assigned to their first project until several months after the training was over, and they had to really start over. You know, the online learning, I think, really misses that human element. We don't push online only. A component of blended learning that can help you overcome this situation is something we call a capstone project. After the Department of Defense experience, we went ahead on their request and expanded this to a 3-day project, and it meets their allows their green belts to meet their project requirement right in class. And the class is divided into teams. They're given a problem. They have 3 structured days in order to solve that problem. And we've been told that with that model, it's just a tremendous learning experience to pull this together. I just did one for a major rental car company, and they brought people in from all over the country, and it was a virtual class, and some of these people never met each other until they actually got onto the to the capstone project, and it turned out to be a real good experience for them. So we definitely think that there has to be a face-to-face component of some sort.
Now, why not, just to play the devil's advocate so I can understand it a little bit better, why not have individuals go through online training and then have online individual problem solving, you know, portions of a capstone project or an entire capstone project that an individual would solve, rather than bringing people together and working as a team to solve it?
Well, because major feedback we get is, yeah, the tools aren't that hard, but wow, getting all these people to agree on which one to do next is tough. Giving them that experience to work together as a team, because we try to put them together, people that are strangers or maybe don't work together every day, just to see how they can function. Then we kind of ask them to rotate the leadership of the team in each of the sessions too, and that gets to be a real experience. So a lot of the feedback we've gotten is the big part of it was not only how do the tools all fit together, but wow, I didn't know this team stuff was so tough.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. All right. So let's talk more about blended learning and getting the right balance. It sounds like there are some pitfalls to in-person learning. There are some pitfalls to online-only learning. Are there any pitfalls to blended learning?
Actually, it's a good question. There really are. Blended learning done right can be very beneficial to an organization. Blended learning done wrong can be very detrimental. And if people have a bad online experience, they don't forget that very quickly. So the e-learning component has to be very well done. And I think one of the pitfalls I've seen is there's such an abundance of low-cost software and video editing tools out there. It's very
John, are you still there? Hey, John, I'm sorry. We had a Skype sort of slow down and catch up. You were just saying that there's such an abundance of online of learning options, and it becomes so cheap for people to put together video options that something was happening. That
what happens is the results are often less than desirable, and you may get the words and the graphics on the page, but you got to remember you're asking your people to step away from the job and spend time watching this stuff, and so it has to be engaging, it has to be interesting, it has to be relevant, it has to be very interactive. Poorly done e-learning that doesn't use a professional voice and doesn't take adult learning into consideration can set you back, really.
Yeah, definitely. And for anybody that doesn't know what adult learning is and how to develop adult learning, I suggest you go and Google it just so you can learn all of the intricacies involved in doing that. Not that you're going to become an expert in it just by Googling it and reading a couple articles on it, but there is an entire science around adult learning objectives and coming up with content. So let me ask you this. I don't want to turn this into a pitch for the quality group, because you do provide learning management systems as well as a host of other companies. But I ask you this because you have expertise in this learning management system and you've implemented it at Seagate in the past. What does a company, what are the requirements of a company that would make them more successful at implementing a learning management system? In other words, do they need a certain number of employees that need to be trained per year? Do they have to have a curriculum as large as a Lean Six Sigma program? What are some of the specifications around learning at an organization that would lead a company to sort of look at a learning management system as an option?
By a learning management system, you're talking about the software to control the system and everything like that.
Correct.
That's something I always kind of left up to the training professionals in the organization to figure out. A learning management system is something that allows you to get control of your entire population, or at least keep an eye on and manage who's doing what. It's really nice to know that as people come into class that they've actually completed the modules they've been assigned. And if they know, well, somebody's kind of keeping an eye on that, then there's a little bit of peer pressure that kicks in, and they have more of a tendency to want to do that. Learning management systems can tie into things like performance appraisal systems and things like that too, as they get more and more complicated. Our Officeworks platform is a type of learning management system that allows a lot of flexibility for the user to get in and structure classes and put together menus and really run a customized environment, where a corporate learning management system may be very inflexible and require IT intervention, in other words, to get in, maybe restructure menus and things. So
right. Yeah, if I understand correctly, your system will allow me, if I'm at a corporate environment, to use your content if I don't have any, to create my own content if I want to write something about, Kanban or something, and record it and deliver it, organize the curriculum, add people to the learning management system, assign them to certain curriculum, and the curriculum could change over time, so I can have different versions of it as time progresses and the needs of the business change. I can track them through the system, so I can say they must complete modules 1 through 3 before going to in-person training, or before
Absolutely.
joining my CEO at an event. They must complete the first 3 modules and show that they've achieved a certain percentage of knowledge by taking a test that's administered through your system. Mm-hmm. All of those things are things that a learning management system can do, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. To give you an example of that, we had a client that said, I want a basic design of experiments class for my engineers, and let's throw in failure mode and effect analysis while we're at it. So we were able to structure together a menu that included not only the FMEA introduction, but all the basic statistics that an engineer would need in order to be successful in designed experiments. They structured the menu together, they tracked their people through that, sent them reminders that, hey, class is a week off, you haven't started yet, and that type of thing. So when we got together in the class, we were able to cover that whole body of knowledge really in 3 days.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Helicopters flying around and catapults and everything imaginable.
And, I'm sure the MBBs want to know that everybody that shows up for class has completed all the prerequisites, and your system determines if they've attended the sessions and if they've
Sure.
taken the test, and if they pass the test with a certain percentage. Otherwise, they have to go back and retake the course again, the course module.
Sure. Yeah, the people can be put together in a class, and then you can actually get a matrix that shows the class and the modules, and you can look at time spent in the modules, the scores they got on the exams, and lots of different things. So there's a real strong reporting feature there.
Yeah. So back to my question just before we laid out what could go into a learning management system. Clearly, if I only had 5 people in my organization that needed training and they were all in the same geographic area, probably a learning management system might be overkill because it has a certain cost associated with it. But if I have a 20,000 people over a multiple geographic area with multiple waves of training going, that might be a great scenario for a learning management system. Do you agree that those bounds sound reasonable?
Absolutely. In fact, if people come together and say, hey, we've got 4 or 5 people we need to train, what's the best way to do it? We'll refer them to one of our academic partners who's doing these classes on an ongoing basis. I teach classes now through the University of Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we're pulling people in all the time that, they've got 5 people in their company that need to be trained, and it's really not worth it to get in and make that investment. So they'll go and they'll have all the benefits through the university of having their own e-learning portal. They'll have access to it for a year after class and all the materials. They just won't have to make that big upfront investment. You get up to a certain size in the company, and they need that level of flexibility and size. Then it makes sense for them to go ahead and get their own branded portal.
Yeah, and any idea what that number is for an organization to?
Not really.
No,
it varies. It's a lot in the amount of flexibility that they need, and they have a lot of people to train. I don't have a hard fast number, but
All right, I won't put you on the spot anymore then with the numbers. And once a company implements a learning management system like the one you offer at the Quality Group, is that a system that requires a full team to administer, or does it only take one person to administer, or one part-time person? Any idea?
Again, it depends on the size of the organization, but no, it really is very simple. It's very intuitive to use. There's online training available for the online training network, so as a person everything they need right there. It's very simple to run. I pretty much did it at my gate. I had an administrator help me on occasion, but as a master black belt, it took very little of my time to actually set all this up and administer it.
All right. I just want to point out to the audience, we are having some small video audio delays. I apologize for that. John has a storm going on over there. It's always stormy here in Seattle. So, you know, between the two of us, we're fighting against the internet gnomes. I did catch everything there, but if the audience that's watching this video notices a lag between the video and the audio, I just wanted to acknowledge that for them. Is blended learning less expensive than classroom only or online only training?
In the long run, absolutely, because you make that initial investment and you're really, we look at the ROI on this, and that's another thing we do when we help an organization set up, is we can help them with a return on investment model for their program. You know, it's pretty quick, really. You're saving not only the obvious travel time and expenses and classroom time, but it's the time to knowledge, the time to your performance proficiency. That's the important metric there, I think. So in the long run, they're not only seeing those types of reductions, but they're seeing faster return on their projects as well, because their projects are getting completed faster, and that's the bottom line of all of this.
Yeah, that is the most important. If somebody has to look at just the expense that they have in implementing a learning management system, John, can they expect the return on investment in 12 months or 24 months? Clearly it's going to vary by different program, but
sure.
What have you seen generally in the past?
I've seen it 8 to 12 months, and medium-sized companies, pretty much.
All right, so we talked about projects being one of the most important metrics. Let me ask you this: how do you, since the whole point of learning online, in-person, blended is the learning, the knowledge transfer, how do you measure that in your system to make sure that you're maximizing that knowledge transfer?
Well, that's an excellent question, and we go back to the Kirkpatrick model, which presents you a four-level assessment of training effectiveness. And the first two levels that you have, the reaction and the learning, are to understand the extent to which the participants have grasped the material and how it improves their skills. You can do that at the end of the learning event. You can do that as part of the training class. And we found that people going through the blended program, that's very good. There's a very rapid knowledge transfer, and we've seen the exams results and things like that improve pretty drastically over the classroom model. The other part of that, levels 3 and 4, look at behavior and results to see to what extent the participants have actually changed their behavior and how are they impacting the workplace. That's a little trickier to measure, and that's where your whole educational process needs to extend beyond the end of the learning event. To give you an example, I worked with a company that put in a new project tracking system, and everybody in the organization went off and got their training like they were supposed to, and sat in class a couple of days and absorbed it all. And then after about a month or so, the director noticed that only about 1 out of 10 people were actually using the system, and the few that were using it weren't really using it right. And they thought the training was the problem. Training said no, application is the problem. So, a typical issue, how do you resolve this? Now, if you looked at this with a blended model, you could put together an online portion of this that could serve as a permanent ongoing reference. So as people came into class, then the whole thing could be revolved around practice and actually picking up and learning those skills. And then setting expectations at the end of class that, okay, yeah, class is over. However, this learning event is going to continue on until we have assessed your effectiveness, and here's how we're going to do that. And once you've done that, then you can start to get a pretty good start on the levels 3 and 4. Most companies never go beyond levels 1 and 2 in their training assessment.
All right, Kirkpatrick model. I'm going to have to do a little more research on that one. So we talked about the wastes of classroom training. We talked about some of the pitfalls of online-only learning where you don't get the person-to-person interaction, and Lean and Six Sigma events are all about changing, the way people operate. So clearly working together with people is important. Anything else that professionals at organizations need to know to make a case for blended learning at their organization?
Well, I think it's it goes down to your return on investment. You need that to be very fast and very measurable. And I think the Department of Defense is a real good example. They had a measurable increase in the speed and the impact of their greenbelt training in the projects that were completed and how well those projects were coming together. I had the opportunity to conduct a black belt level class for a marketing organization, and they sent 16 people to class that were divided into 4 teams. And they came in with actual projects and that were predefined by their manager. And we were able to customize the class to meet their specific needs as marketing people, a little heavier on the lean, a little less on the statistics. And we did the class in about half the classroom hours. And I think the significant thing there is they actually used the projects as their classroom activities. And so by the time we got to the end of the class, one of the projects was almost completed. The others were very close behind. And it was probably one of the most successful classes I had done because everybody came in at the same level. Everybody had a very clear project to work on. And we were able to work on those actual projects right there in class. We had another real good experience with the casino where we taught the class right on the casino floor. And we worked on, maintenance problems that they were running into there. And so it's everybody got out there. We had some people that had statistics in college. We heard people that couldn't even pronounce the S word. And so once they got out there, though, they at least were at the same level and were able to participate very quickly. So blended learning works. It done right, it works very well.
Yeah. Let me know the next time you're going to the casino to run that project, John. I will be there as well. I love hitting the casinos in Vegas.
All right.
All right. The final question is this, John. What do you see in the future of corporate learning that the AIESEC Sigma audience should start to think about now?
You're going to see a rapid increase in the use of the social media tools. And things are moving so fast now. You're getting what I call kind of the iPod generation. These people come into the workplace expecting to be able to get their questions answered very quickly, not patient with sitting in class. You've got the challenge of the baby boomers like myself who, would rather sit in a class, all kind of mixed together. But I think in the future here, we're going to see a tremendous increase in the technology and the availability of these types of courses.
Yeah, and so corporations better get ready because this is the workforce of the future.
Absolutely.
All right, if you have a follow-up question for John, please post it in the comments below this video, and we'll ask him to come back and answer as many as he can. If you'd like to follow John and the Quality Group on their Twitter account, they are at the Quality Group. And John, this is the portion of the video where I urge the audience right now, if you receive value out of this interview, and I know I did because John's done a fantastic job explaining the process of learning and differentiating between in-person and online and blended and all the different options, please take a moment and say thank you. It's as easy as posting a comment below this show, following the Quality Group on Twitter, or even sending John an email just to say thank you. John, if somebody wants to send you an email, ask you a follow-on question, say thanks for doing the video, is there a better email address that they can use?
jbest@thequalitygroup.net.
Excellent. jbest@thequalitygroup.net. John Best, Vice President of Lean Six Sigma for the Quality Group, thank you for coming on the AIESEC Sigma Show, sharing your knowledge of e-learning and helping others become more successful change agents and business leaders.
Mike, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.